What is going on, everyone? Welcome to our next divisional draft grades video. Doing the AFC East here today. Not going to waste any time getting started here as we transition to our first team, the Buffalo Bills. If you could take just a second to slide that thumb over and hit that like button. It takes just a second. It actually really helps support my channel as well. I really appreciate it. But let's dive in with the Buffalo Bills, who I think after a really underwhelming offseason, after years of expectations, they really needed a big draft here to kind of get things back in the right direction. So they made a bunch of picks here. Let's talk about how they did, in my opinion, based on my own evaluations here. So they start things off going Keon Coleman with the first pick in the second round after the rare double trade down. We don't see that a ton. You factor in the trade downs here, there's a lot to break down. I give this pick a solid B. To begin with, I think Keon Coleman's a really good receiver prospect. This is about the range I had him going, in that 1 to 2 range. I think he's got a really good projection as an intermediate to short receiving threat in the league. My pro comp on him is Michael Pittman, something I feel, at least role-wise, very similarly, where he's going to be, I think, a really great threat on slants and crossing routes and a really dynamic run after catch threat. If you can find ways to get the ball in his hands, where I think he does show better athleticism as a football player with the pads on when the ball's in his hands, as opposed to really kind of just like Michael Pittman here. You know, he's not a great separator, especially when you want to talk about, like, can he stack a cornerback on the outside, get on top of his shoulder and accelerate vertically and be that vertical threat? That's really where I think Keon Coleman's going to be lacking. I think he's a specific fit within an NFL offense. In terms of the caliber player he is, again, I have no problem with him at the top of the second round. Now, I do have some issues with him, A, as the fit with the Bills, as their offense is currently constructed, and B, passing up some other receiver options in those trade downs that I think would have been better impacts for this Bills team. So I said Keon Coleman is kind of an intermediate to short monster, not so much a deep threat. Well, for the Bills, this offseason, they got rid of Diggs, they got rid of Gabe Davis, and they have a quarterback in Josh Allen who arguably likes to push the deep ball more than any QB in the league, and just he's got those incredible traits. You want to tap into that deep ball ability. So you lost the two guys that can really be an impact deep down the field, and their roster is currently constructed with a bunch of short to intermediate threats. You have Khalil Shakir, who I like in the slot. They drafted Dawson Knox as a big slot last year. You signed Mac Hollins, who's, you know, really good on deep digs against zone, but not really a one-on-one man beater to the outside or on like deep posts that Josh Allen loves to throw. You did bring in Curtis Samuel, who's the fastest receiver on this team, but has never been much of a deep threat. You know, he's got the speed, but in terms of the release, the ball tracking, the size and contested catch ability and catch radius and just hands to track the deep ball, it's just not all there. With Curtis Samuel, he's another one of these kind of rack guys, intermediate guys. And James Cook is a great receiving threat in the short to intermediate. So all of these guys, I think you had plenty of weaponry in the areas of the field that Keon Coleman projects best at the next level. For me, you needed a guy that was going to open this offense back up for the run game and for Josh Allen to tap into deep. And you pass on Worthy, you pass on Leggett, who with his size and physicality, I think was a supercharged version of Gabe Davis. I don't know if they knew that those were going to be the guys that those teams were picking, but they did have the opportunity to get those guys. So while I think the value is fine on Coleman, and I think he does fill a role as the outside X in this offense, a guy that will work the sidelines, be a reliable contested catch target for Josh Allen in a pinch, I think there's a role for him, but I certainly would have gone in a different direction for this team. And I really don't like that, you know, when we look at this Dwayne Carter pick in a minute, you had guys like Troy Franklin, Tez Walker, Javon Baker, guys that could have complemented Keon Coleman really well, and they don't go in that direction. So that's where I look at this Bills draft really and say, did you get enough explosiveness in this offense? I think you're asking Josh Allen to really finesse it out there in the short to intermediate and not maximizing his biggest strength with this roster construction. So, you know, I have some negative thoughts on this pick, but I do like Keon Coleman. I want to reemphasize that. So An interesting pick to start things off with this video. But let's go to Cole Bishop. I think they nailed this pick. A lot of people thought he was going to fall to the 3rd, 4th round. I had a 2nd round grade on him. My high-end pro comp on him is Micah Hyde. So pretty on the nose there, right? Just a rangy, fluid mover on the back end. Someone that I thought, having played a lot of slot corner at Utah, Micah Hyde was a slot corner coming out of Iowa in a couple years for the Packers, but easy skills to translate into a split safety over the top in a system that loves to run quarters and cover 2. That's exactly what they do here in Buffalo and McDermott's system. So this definitely made sense. That Micah Hyde comp is very much on the nose there. So I do think they made a great pick to replace one of those 2 safeties that they lost, losing both Poyer and Hyde this offseason. Now, this is definitely my least favorite pick that they made, DeWayne Carter out of Duke. Now, I will start out the gate in saying a lot of people made the point that his 2022 tape was a lot better than his 2023 tape. So if they can get 2022 DeWayne Carter and he can be another kind of impact pass rusher next to Ed Oliver, this C grade is going to look bad. Based on his 2023 tape that I watched, I did not see someone that, well, he's an undersized pass rusher. He's kind of that pass rushing specialist type of defensive tackle. I didn't see a guy that would be an impact against the run, clearly. But I didn't even really see a guy that's going to be a good enough pass rusher to really justify being a designated pass rush, like starter role in your offense. I saw a guy that's more of like, yeah, he's kind of like the perfect Ed Oliver backup, where if Oliver goes down, you can play DeWayne Carter and do the same stuff with him. But I think from an efficiency standpoint, I just didn't see DeWayne Carter winning enough with the traits, really, to be that type of guy. He's a good athlete, but he's not like an insane athlete to be that undersized kind of starting defensive tackle in the league. So I definitely had him as more of a day 3 talent. And now they get him at the end of the 3rd round. It's not the end of the world. But this is where I did want to reflect, like, okay, they had Troy Franklin, who had fallen at this point. I would have loved Javon Baker here. I think Tez Walker. I think if you wanted to go Keon Coleman early, that's totally fine. But they could have made that make a lot more sense if they put someone in this building with a little bit more vertical juice that I think Josh Allen could have really worked with. So for me, you passed on an impact deep threat wide receiver that could have put the whole picture together with the offense. For a backup defensive tackle. So I'm going to be critical of that pick. I'm giving that a C. I hope I'm wrong about his upside. I really do. He's a fun player. When he wins, it's fun. He's got, a variety of different finesse pass rush moves that he wins with. But I did think this was, you're looking for starters on the first 2 days of the draft. I just didn't see that in DeWayne Carter personally. Now, day 3 was really fun for them. This is where you do reap the benefits of that trade down. It was kind of hard to track exactly where all these picks fell with all the moves and stuff trading out of the 1st round. But at the end of the day, they made a bunch of really good picks, kind of going with that LA Rams strategy from last year. The Rams were entering kind of a rebuild year, a little bit more dramatic than what the Bills went through this offseason. But just hoping, okay, you get basically a full draft's worth of picks on day 3. You hope if 2 or 3 of these guys can turn into starters, you're walking out of this draft sitting pretty. So I really like their approach, and honestly, down the board, I think they kind of nailed their picks. I like Ray Davis, right around where I had him going. Late 4th, early 5th. Definitely their style. I do think they've missed Devin Singletary. I do. James Cook with the fumbles and just not the best between the tackles ability. I know he's a fan favorite. He's super explosive. He's got a ton of potential, but they need this role as well in cold weather Buffalo to have a no-nonsense bruising back that can do the dirty work for them. And that guy wasn't Damian Harris for some reason. They thought it might have been, Latavius Murray. They made some free agent signings, but they get a guy that can come in young and on a cheap rookie contract to hopefully get that done for them. So I like that pick. Probably going to be that sort of classic fantasy football vulture where he ends up with 400 rushing yards but 8 or 9 touchdowns on the season. But then you go Cedric Van Pran. I think the best value they got out of all of their picks in this draft. I had a true 3rd round grade on him. I really didn't think there was a huge, and maybe this bites me in the ass, but it's just what I was seeing on film. I didn't see a huge gap between Cedric Van Pran and Zach Frazier, who goes in the second round of the Steelers. I thought they were both really good center prospects. I think Van Pran got buried a little bit. Not really sure why he fell to the 5th round. I thought his tape was really good. He's not the traitiest guy, but neither is Zach Frazier. So if Cedric Van Pran was a 4-time wrestling champ in high school, probably goes in the 3rd round or second. I think he's their starting center. I do. If not right away, certainly within the first year or two of this rookie contract. They're going to slide Connor McGovern inside. They've got David Edwards, who's had injury problems at left guard right now. I could definitely see a world where David Edwards goes down, you slide McGovern back out to guard, Cedric Van Pran gets plugged in at center and never looks back for at least a few years, right? So love that pick. One of my favorites in this draft. And then they go, Edifon Ulofoshio. Not going to knock it here at the end of the 5th round. A 24-year-old developmental linebacker. I wasn't the biggest fan of him, but the value's fine. He's going to be a really good special teamer for you, a ton of speed. And, there are physical traits in there that maybe when he's 27 years old and Matt Milano's getting older, if he can develop, maybe there's starter traits in there. It's just, it hasn't really clicked for him in a long time in college. So is that really going to happen in the pros? It's one of those deals. But it was a fine enough pick. But then I love Javon Solomon a few picks later. Right at the back end of where I thought he would go, 4th round, I would have been totally fine with Javon Solomon. I think he has potential to be sort of that starting designated pass rush role, something like a Bryce Huff, for example, where he's not the best run defender, maybe not all of the traits in the world to project as like this full-time starter, but someone that you bring in for 400 snaps, mostly rushing the passer, and he's got really unique traits to be a problem for even NFL tackles. He's under 6'1", so he's really short, but he's got above average arm length, nearly 34-inch arms. Now he's a little bit more of a finesse rusher. I would love to see him try to get the bull rush going a little bit more, because I think with that profile, that could be a huge threat for him. So it's something to monitor with him. If he can, this could be a sort of, dare I say, something close to a 10-sack player that is giving you splash pass rush reps every week or so. Like, I definitely could see it if that bull rush could come along. But, he's got a good, finesse tool belt as well. He's just a very kind of explosive, bendy, unique challenge for offensive tackles. So I like that here at the end of the 5th round. Really good risk to take for a pass rush that has been rather underwhelming. And you do still have Von Miller in the building to kind of teach him some stuff too, which, he's known. I know the off-field stuff has become a little shady with Von Miller lately, but still as a pass rushing mentor on the football field, I like him in that role. You go Tylen Grable, developmental tackle that I didn't get to in the 6th round. That's fine enough. Daquan Hardy, though, at the end of the 6th round, this was a very tiny win for me. I was in the minority that had Daquan Hardy as the best corner out of Penn State this year. He ends up being the first one drafted. Again, no big deal, but I did like him. That's kind of what I'm getting at there. Just kind of a potential starting slot in the NFL. Not right away, but there's a little bit of Dane Jackson in there with me, where he's really quick, maybe not the fastest guy or the biggest guy, but he's quick and smart. I saw a lot of good football in him, so I someone to keep an eye on there is a late 6th round pick. Certainly good DB depth and special teams impact while you kind of see what you have from him. And then they go Travis Clayton, the kind of overseas developmental project type. We saw multiple sort of Jordan Mailata style swings in this draft for teams. This was the Bills' best crack at that. So, a 2 or 3 year project, maybe you can stash him. That would be ideal on that specific international pathway program roster spot on the practice squad. I think that's the hope. Buffalo, the closest NFL team to England, I believe. So that's a plus for him to go to Buffalo. Can fly home a little bit quicker than if he went to the Chargers. And then one UDFA steal that I like for this team, Frank Gore Jr. Obviously, gotta love taking Frank Gore's son. You're going to get a hard-nosed kid, and that's what he is. Now, he's a lot smaller and less fast than his father was, but really good vision, kind of a no-nonsense between the tackles guy. A lot of Devin Singletary vibes watching Frank Gore Jr. So another kind of, option for what they were looking for in Ray Davis, who's just a little bit bigger, a little bit faster than a guy like Gore Jr. But ultimately, I'm going to go with a B grade on the Buffalo Bills. I think it was a solid draft. I don't know that this was that slam dunk draft that I feel like they needed to kind of get right back into AFC contention. I am a little bit worried about the verticality elements of this offense pairing with Josh Allen. So that'll be something to monitor here. But then you get to the Miami Dolphins. Okay, this is going to be an interesting one to navigate through because just this draft overall, I do have questions about ignoring the interior offensive line. I like the picks they made, but I do wonder if that's going to be a regret for them. This was probably the best and deepest interior O-line class in years, and to not go with anybody in this draft, I just do have questions about that, especially when you're, you know, kind of going with luxury speed players. It's like, okay, they're good players, but we get the bit, Miami. Don't you want a little bit of physicality after what happened in the cold in Kansas City last year? So, you know, just a note on the draft as overall there. Now, I'm not going to destroy them for this draft, but there's definitely some spots I would have gone in a different direction. So that would start with Chop Robinson. I don't think it's a bad pick, right? And I think at the end of the day, they know more about the medical situations with Jaelan Phillips and Bradley Chubb than we do. This is definitely a gut-wrenching pick if you're a Dolphins fan because you like those players. You've invested a lot in those players. And I don't think you make this pick if you feel good about really either of those edge rushers' future, right? I mean, it's just tough to swallow, man. It's not that this impacts the grade, but I think it's at least worth talking about where, you know, Bradley Chubb coming off his second ACL injury, you just extended him, so that's a tough pill to swallow. And then with Jaelan Phillips, it's like this guy was drafted because of medical concerns and is coming off the Achilles injury, and they still got to pay him. So it's just a really tough situation. I think they felt like, you know, they kind of got backed into a corner by those edge rush injuries, and I do think they had to kind of. It's tough to call Chop Robinson a reach. I have a first to a second round grade on him, which is kind of that 20 to 40 range. So this is like right on the precipice of where I would have started to think about Chop Robinson. But I do think there was a lot of better players that they could have picked here. I talked about that interior offensive line need. Like, dude, give me a Graham Barton to give me a rock in the middle of that interior offensive line. I think with Chop, like, good prospect. He brings that insane burst and bend around the corner that you just don't find in a lot of prospects. But I do think there's a world where this is just Vic Beasley, where this is all he brings to the table, and he's not a run defender. And, like, you know, does he develop the power? Does he develop the inside counters off of that? That's going to be a critical factor in if Chop Robinson can be a hit for you with the 21st pick in this draft. So I'm not saying those things can't happen, but there's a risk aspect that they don't. I ended up going with a B on this pick. Again, they know more about the injury situations than we do. It's not really a reach, though it is in this draft class when there's so many good players available. You know, Chop was my 35th player on my big board, so just kind of to tell you where I'm coming from there. But, you know, Patrick Paul pick in the second round, I'm not a fan of this pick. Now, he's got incredible lengthy traits. He's a good athlete. I had a third round grade on him, and he has really high potential, right? But I certainly don't think he's ready to play right away, and that's fine. You know, they have Armstead, who's not the long-term answer, but he does get hurt. There's a very reasonable world where Patrick Paul is out there having to protect Tua, and in year one, I don't love that. For me, like, if you wanted to go tackle, I think Blake Fisher was a much better prospect. I think much more ready to play now. I think a better overall tackle prospect, and I think actually gave you some guard flexibility in year one to be that guy that could kind of play guard now, but is your future, your tackle of the future. So I definitely would have gone in a different direction. This is early for me on Patrick Paul, where I did see him really behind the 8 ball in terms of his development curve, being a really raw fifth-year player coming out of college. So I understand why they went with him, and you could even argue he's got a higher upside than Blake Fisher. But the floor and the positional flexibility and kind of what this team needed with some interior offensive line help right away. There's just a lot of different directions I would have gone there. So I'm going to go with a C on Patrick Paul. I hope he turns into a starting tackle for them, because if that happens, you're not going to complain about this pick years down into the future. But even then, you know, this is a top 50 pick, and the sort of day one impact of this pick is a little bit hard to swallow, when I think he could have threaded the needle a little bit better with some other guys. Even like a Kingsley Suamataia, who ends up going to the Chiefs, I think gives you the same developmental long-term plan, but someone with a little bit more guard flexibility. Not to mention Blake Fisher, who I mentioned. Both those guys came off the board a couple picks later. But then no third-round pick. Then you go, you know, middle to end of the fourth round. They take Jaylen Wright. And this is definitely the pick where I'm like, okay, I see it, right? Like, he's your type. He's, you know, Raheem Mostert-esque. You can sit him behind Mostert, who has injury, like a history of injuries. Achane, they want to keep long-term. They want that hyper-athletic RB duo. I understand the pick, and you know, end of the fourth round is good value on Jaylen Wright. But this is the pick I look at and say, okay, you could have gone Cedric Van Pran. You could have gone Christian Mahogany. You could have gone Hunter Nauerzad. All guys that I think would start day one on this offensive line for Miami. This was really the pick where I'm like, all right, are we getting a little bit too, you know, drinking the Kool-Aid with the whole speed thing? You know, Jaylen Wright's a good prospect, but Jaylen Wright's come around. I don't know how many years we're going to see the depth of an interior offensive line class available into the fourth round like this. Then I love Mo Kamara. Probably my favorite pick, you know, when you contextualize it for the Dolphins. Not that he'll be the best player for them out of this draft, though it's possible. But I do want to shout out our friends, Brett and EJ, over at the Bootleg Football Podcast. They were on Mo Kamara very early, became a draft darling in this process. And their pro comp on him was Shaq Barrett out of Colorado State. Very similar skill sets. I see it. And Shaq Barrett was an undrafted free agent. So it's not crazy to draw those parallels. Well, you know where Shaq Barrett just signed? Miami Dolphins. So I just think that's super fun. It was a great value. I had him as a third or fourth round guy. You know, ends up going in the fifth here. He's got a ton of bend. He's got power. He's got a really good pass rushing tool belt. He's physical. I think he can defend the run. I don't think the Shaq Barrett parallels, not just the Colorado State thing, but in terms of play style, I don't think it's crazy. So there's a lot of potential there with him as a fifth round pick. Gonna give that a certified steal grade. Like, this is takey, but I think there is a 10 to 15% chance that he's a better player than Chop Robinson. 10 to 15% chance, but there's a world where that happens. And then you go Malik Washington. I mean, in the sixth round, this isn't quite like the Jaylen Wright pick where some of those good interior offensive line pieces were really still there, so I can't be really critical of that. You know, I don't know how much she's going to play in year one. I still like Braxton Berrios as a slot receiver for them, but, you know, you project out a couple of years, like, I definitely think he'll be their wide receiver 3, at least as long as this is what the operation of the offense looks like with Waddle and Hill as the primary guys, and then you want some more juice in the slot when those guys get taken away. So he definitely has that. He doesn't quite have the long speed of guys like Waddle and Hill, so I don't think you're talking about a replacement for those roles. But as a third piece behind those guys, 100%. I think you could do that right now. It's just you have Berrios ahead of him. Okay, Patrick Morris, safety out of Cal. Didn't get to him, but safety depth and special teams talent. And then Taj Washington, another kind of one of these like gadgety classic Dolphins types of picks. I see him probably more as just a return man for them because, I mean, he's going to have 4 wide receivers at least ahead of him on that depth chart coming in. But, you know, he was a good player. I had him as an early day 3 type, and I think it's good value at the very end of the 7th round. And, you know, with the new kick return rules, love him for that, punt returner. But on top of that, just they have a depth chart loaded now with their types of dudes. They could survive a run of injuries and not see a drop-off. So, I mean, when you're talking that late of a pick, I'm going to say it's a great pick on Taj Washington. Then they got one undrafted free agent I liked in Grayson Murphy. He was the worst of the twin brothers there. I liked Gabriel a lot better, who went to the Vikings, but I did still think Grayson was draftable. So they have a very crowded edge room to sort through in camp. But if you're starting the year and both Chubb and Phillips are like on injured reserve to start the year, maybe Grayson Murphy can make the team. And he's one of those kind of like, he can do a little bit of everything types. He can drop into coverage. He's kind of that classic 3-4 outside backer type. So like that as an undrafted free agent pickup. At the end of the day, I'm going to go C+ on the Dolphins. I don't think they really helped their team this year. And there were picks I would go in with other directions. There's a world where you walk away with an impactful, kind of, let's just say Hassan Reddick as the upside for Chop Robinson, and then a starting left tackle in Patrick Paul. If those guys hit, this C+ is going to look stupid. But I do think there's risk attached to those prospects as well with where they went. So that plus, like, man, they could have walked out of this draft with some more help on the interior offensive line, because I don't think they have a starting caliber player on the interior of the offensive line on that roster currently, other than Isaiah Wynn, but he gets hurt all the time. So I am going to be questionable of that process for them. All right, then we got the New England Patriots. A bit of a roller coaster draft for me. I mean, obviously, when the Commanders pass on Jaden Daniels and you're able to get Drake May with the 3rd pick, it's incredible. For them to come into the offseason not getting that number 2 pick, and I think it was a tiebreaker between them and Washington, right? You're like, well, they're going to have to really pray that they get an opportunity to get a quarterback in the future. They don't have to sit here and think like that anymore, because Commanders firmly, in my opinion, take the wrong guy. You have on the phone, the Vikings are trying to sell their soul. They wanted to give up 3 first-round picks to come up for Drake May. You had the Giants on the phone. They wanted to come up for Drake May. I don't buy these reports that 2 out of 3 teams had Daniels over Drake May. I just don't. I mean, 1 team passed on Drake May. Those are 3 massively QB needy teams that basically were dying to get Drake May, because the Patriots, it was very reasonable for them to take 3 first-round picks from the Vikings in what's at that point like an overpay to come up to the number 3 pick. But the Patriots are like, nope, we see Drake May probably closer to like I do, where we don't know if we're going to have an opportunity to take a quarterback like Drake May, who in a lot of draft classes would be the number 1 overall pick. I really feel that way about Drake May. Clearly, Brian Daboll did. Kevin O'Connell did. The Patriots did at 3. That's enough for me to say I'm not crazy on this whole Drake May thing. So this is a huge steal. Now, as high as I am on May, I'm dreadfully worried about the landing spot here, and this making me look like an idiot in a few years for really saying like, no, he should have gotten number 2, because this is probably the worst possible landing spot for a young quarterback. We saw what happened with Mac Jones. They're bringing in a whole new staff. It's an unestablished culture and offense to begin with. Then you have basically no wide receivers here, no offensive line here for the most part. They have a couple pieces, but no left tackle, no right guard, like literal kind of borderline UFL talent out there at the moment. And I just don't think this is a livable situation for a young quarterback to come in. I don't. That would apply to Jaden Daniels. That would apply to Caleb Williams. I'd be worried about it. I'd be applied, like, I don't think really any quarterback could come in and truly survive the situation if it stays as it is. So I am begging the Patriots, please, for the love of God, like, if you know people in that organization, I need Drake May to be great. Please, for the love of God, send this to someone with the Patriots. Do not play him week 1. Please, please do not play him week 1. You will ruin this pick. You have to at least give this a couple months to let things sort out. See how the play calling is. See how your new hires work. See how the offensive line looks. See if you hit on guys like Polk and Baker, who you desperately need to hit. See if you were right about reaching on Caden Wallace, in my opinion, in the 3rd round. You cannot put Drake May out there. It's going to look exactly like what happened in Drake May's home state with Bryce Young. So I acknowledge that Drake Maye is like, this is far from over, right? Like, I love him as a prospect. Like I said, he would go number 1 in a lot of years. He's got incredible arm talent. I think his accuracy issues are there, but have become overstated over the last couple of months. I think there's some footwork stuff that certainly could be cleaned up. I think in terms of the pocket feel, that's the one knock on Drake Maye. I don't know how well he kind of manages the pocket against the rush. Got some questions there, but for the most part, again, this is a steal for, he shouldn't have been there, but he was. So time will tell on how they handle him, handle his development, handle their offense's development. And that's where I get to day 2 of the draft. And those worries only got worse on day 2 of the draft. They did. I'm lower on Ja'Lynn Polk. I like Ja'Lynn Polk. I had him as a 3rd round talent. I think he's a really high floor, capable weapon, but as like a 3rd or 4th piece, like the physical intermediate guy, the run blocker, some good run after catch threat, a guy that can run some digs and slants and be reliable. He is a high floor, tough dude at the wide receiver position, but this was a draft class with potential difference makers, and I think they passed on several of them. They trade down with the Chargers, who come up for Ladd McConkey, who I think would have been such a better player for them in terms of getting someone in this wide receiver group that can actually beat one-on-one man coverage. I don't see a guy on this roster that can do that for them, and that's a huge worry for a guy like Drake Maye. It's why it's very similar to the Panthers last year, where they had some adequate pieces, but it was a disaster. They had to go out and get Deontay Johnson, which is my pro comp for Ladd McConkey. You can win early, and you can actually win outside and be a vertical threat. You pass on him. I think Adonai Mitchell as a potential number 1 to just grow and work with Drake Maye would have been a ton of fun here. Now, a lot of receivers had gone. Polk, though I had a 3rd round grade on him, was, after those 2 names, probably the guy I would take. But again, after those 2 names, and you had Ladd McConkey, you traded down. So it's not my favorite pick. Now, they did make up for it because the other pick they got in that trade down, they took Javon Baker. And I want to just jump forward to that because, I had Baker pretty close to Ja'Lynn Polk in my evaluations. Does some different stuff. He's a little bit more of a classic X in terms of role, where he's going to win on the outside. He can come down with deep balls, back shoulders, chemistry balls to get him in the building to work with Drake Maye, probably on the second team in practice. I think it's a good combo. So they did make up some ground getting him in the trade down, but they did get lucky that he was there, in the 10th pick in the 4th round, right? So I think they got some good players at wide receiver, but I don't think they got great players, and I think they could have with what the options were available for them. And then the Caden Wallace pick is just weird to me. And not that there was necessarily a million tackles that I thought were dramatically better. There was a couple. I think Christian Jones and Javon Foster were better tackle prospects. But either way, it's like I just think this was too early for Caden Wallace. Whatever you think about Foster and Christian Jones, like if you're looking at this, like I understand why they felt we have to go tackle here. We have to get a left tackle. I understand the thinking there, and that's why it's a D. You did take a need pick, but at the end of the day, like if you're drafting for need, but the guy's not a starting caliber player, eventually you're just not drafting for need because he's not slotting in as a starter for you. I saw Caden Wallace very similar to a 6th round pick that the Vikings took, Walter Rouse, as a guy that, is probably a backup tackle, maybe a starting guard. Like if you kick him inside, like things could translate better for them, but just not the athletic profile and really the tape to be a starting tackle. So I really hope I'm wrong about that. Obviously, I want Drake Maye to have a left tackle. I just don't think that's Caden Wallace. So there's other players I would have gone with, and I would have flipped this, right? Like take the tackle at 205, give me a Blake Fisher or someone that I think is a potential starter at tackle, and then for me, Polk was more of a 3rd round talent. So I don't love how they navigated that situation there at all. And if I'm New England, I'm getting David Bakhtiari's agent on the phone. Like, how much do we have to pay? Because I get the injury issues there, but they've got to find something better than Caden Wallace at left tackle. But then you get to day 3. I did like what they did. Layden Robinson, a touch early, but he's a good developmental interior offensive line prospect. He can get in the mix to compete with City. So I think between those two players, you've got a decent enough chance to get an adequate guard. But that's why I'm not playing Drake Maye. Let that competition play out. Make sure that right guard is like very similar to what the Panthers had last year, where they're the worst guard play in the league and they couldn't pick up a stunt, and Bryce Young was getting hit the second he got snapped. The ball, it's like, you got to make sure it's not an issue there. So I like the competition at right guard now, but he's got to prove that he's ready. Fine enough pick. We talked about Javon Baker and what I like about that pick, so giving that a great pick grade. You get some special teams and developmental corner depth in Marcellus Dial, freaky athlete out of South Carolina. Good pick. He'll plug in as CB5, CB6 in a good cornerback room. And then Joe Milton, I do think he's going to be a tight end for this team. I just do. 6-year quarterback with ridiculous traits, but has never been able to show any semblance of NFL promise. They put him in that weird Tennessee offense where they have like 15 plays in the playbook, and he had some decent production, but still incredibly inaccurate. The fact that he's this far removed from being NFL ready at this age, it's like, I mean, come on, what are we still doing with Joe Milton here? He's a tight end. He should have made that switch a long time ago, because it's not just like, oh, haha, you're not a quarterback. It's like, no, dude, you could actually be a starting tight end in the league. You have incredible physical tools. You're just, you have a rocket arm. You might have the top 3 strongest arms in the league. The second you got drafted, I don't think that's being hyperbolic. That's why they're still messing around with him as a quarterback. But he doesn't understand the position. He's inaccurate. What good is a strong arm if you can't make the right decisions and you can't throw accurate footballs? So for me, move him to tight end immediately. If he was this way at 21 years old or 22 years old, then sure, let's see if something comes along. But he's going to be 25 in his rookie season. Like, if you're going to waste a year with him at quarterback, then spend a year teaching him tight end, all of a sudden he's 27 years old by the time you're moving him to tight end. So let's get this ball rolling here. This is what he's going to be in the league. Very curious to see how they do that. And then they take another tight end, Jaheim Bell, in the 7th round. Love this pick, man. I think he's a type of mismatch problem that this offense really doesn't have. You're bringing in that Cleveland offensive staff. They love 12 personnel. You have a bigger body tight end in Hunter Henry, but Jaheim Bell is that Jonnu Smith role in this offense. When they signed Jonnu Smith, which is my high-end pro comp on Jaheim Bell, it didn't really work out in New England because they were still running basically Josh McDaniels' offense. And then Bill O'Brien after that, which is in a similar kind of family. These types of tight ends, that sort of wing athlete that's not a great inline player, but, play action, crossing routes, you can, get them lost underneath the formation, come in cross formation on play action boots, flip them the ball, let them go to work. Perfect spot for Jaheim Bell as the number 2. And we saw this Cleveland staff find creative ways to get the ball into David Njoku's hands as well. So I really like that fit. I had him as someone that could have gone as early as the 3rd round. So I think it's incredible value. Love that pick. So for the Patriots, it's an interesting draft because you steal Drake Maye at 3. I like what they did on day 3 of the draft. And even aspects of the trade down worked out for them, getting Javon Baker. But I would have flipped it. I would have taken a tackle with that 37th pick and then gambled that there was wide receivers you liked at the top of the 3rd there, because I just don't see a huge difference maker in Jalen Polk. Or I would have taken, obviously Ladd McConkey or Adonai Mitchell. There's just a lot of different directions I would have gone to get them some better talent invested in that offense, because I think they have the Jalen Polks on this team, right? Like, let's spend a little bit more time there. Like, you have Juju, who's got the injury issues, but you have Kendrick Bourne, you have KJ Osborne, who they signed. Like, those guys are Jalen Polk-esque in terms of the level I think Polk could be at the league, where they're like, starting caliber players, not heavy impacts. Just think there was other ways to go there. So That's been beat into the dirt at this point. We're going B on the Patriots draft, and let's get to our last team in the AFC East with the New York Jets. Love what the Jets did. It really wasn't until the end of the 5th round where there was anything that I disagreed with them doing, or even that I would have gone in a different direction. They start with Olu Fashanu after they trade down, pick up some extra picks that I believe they used to move back up for Corley. Could be off on that, but you know, just like Robert Saleh said in their draft clip that they released, free money, why not? I think they also benefited from the Titans taking J.C. Latham, who is an inferior tackle prospect to Olu Fashanu. I didn't understand why Fashanu dipped so much in the pre-draft process. I always had him as a top 10 tackle, a Laramie Tunsil comp, an incredibly high 4 pass protecting left tackle that does have some questions about the run blocking. But for the Jets, especially seeing them get Corley in that trade up, I think they played this perfectly well because they did need another piece in that offense in terms of weaponry, but they also needed some security on the offensive line. You just don't know with Tyron Smith. You love the risk of the signing, but there's a very real world where he goes down, and then you have Aaron Rodgers with a very fragile body at this point, getting protected by nobody. So you love the Fashanu pick. I don't think he's a starting guard like while they see if Smith gets hurt. I think, no, he's just going to be the backup tackle. You also have Morgan Moses, who's up there in age at right tackle. So there's going to be a point in the season where you're very happy that Fashanu is your backup tackle. Like, that's insane. There's also a bit of a long-term play here as well. Smith is obviously not the long-term left tackle option. There will be New York Jets teams after Aaron Rodgers retires. I think you have a franchise left tackle now in Olu Fashanu. So really difficult to argue with that reasoning over Brock Bowers. I think Brock Bowers gives you the more immediate, like, higher ceiling, because if everybody stays healthy and then you put Brock Bowers into that offense, the ceiling of this team is insane. But they made those ceiling signings in free agency with Mike Williams and Tyron Smith at left tackle. Give you some of that floor pick in the draft. I think it makes total sense to kind of weave those two decisions together, especially when you're able to come up in the draft and get a Malachi Corley. Again, I think they used some of those picks in the trade down from the Vikings to come up and make this move, so it helped you do that. But if you were talking about Brock Bowers being someone that you can basically help protect Aaron Rodgers by being someone that you can utilize his unbelievably quick release. Like, Aaron Rodgers has the fastest release ever for an NFL quarterback. He just does. I don't think you can argue with that. All the metrics back that up. It's part of like why the bubble screen became such a weapon in Green Bay, was like snap, balls out. It's like a handoff on a bubble screen. Malachi Corley with Aaron Rodgers, the ability to just basically get him out in space where he is a running back with the ball in his hands, you know, it accomplishes a lot of the stuff that you were looking to get with Brock Bowers. I think he blocks. I think you play him in line as a slot wide receiver. He's an upgrade to Allen Lazard. He makes total sense with Garrett Wilson and Mike Williams and Malachi Corley being that playmaker type that you can manufacture touches for. I think that's the perfect fit in this offense after not going Brock Bowers early. So outstanding move to come up and get him. And then even into, you know, day 3, the end of the 4th round, Braylon Allen. Love this as a thunder to Breece Hall's lightning. Breece Hall's got some thunder as well, but you can relieve the load a little bit. And I liked Braylon Allen a lot. My pro comp on him was pissed off A.J. Dillon. I think A.J. Dillon runs like you would think a scat back would run. With a lack of power. Braylon Allen throws his shoulder in the guys. He loves to run through linebackers, but he does have light feet to kind of, you know, make guys miss too. So I thought Braylon Allen was a day 2 caliber running back. They get him on day 3. So love that pick for them. Then they go Jordan Travis. I think it's an excellent pick. I love this pick, you know, more for Jordan Travis than I do for the Jets. Not that it was a bad pick for the Jets, but a perfect landing spot for Travis, where, you know, he can sit behind Tyrod Taylor, which I think is probably your long-term upside projection for Jordan Travis. You know, a guy that can kind of float around the league, be a bridge quarterback for teams, a really high-end backup. I think that's a really good future for Jordan Travis. If he, you know, reaches starter upside magically and is the long-term replacement for Aaron Rodgers, hey, I don't think that's out of the range of possibilities either. But at the end of the 5th round, I think it's a really good use of a draft pick. I do think Michael Pratt was a better option for them, but you're splitting hairs. Now, the Isaiah Davis pick is like, why? You just took Allen. You still have Izzy Abanikanda, which it feels like they're giving up on him already. That feels impatient to me. The kid was 20 when you drafted him. So I don't get that. It's not like he's been some great special teamer for South Dakota State or has great speed to impact special teams. So I don't know. I just really wanted to like Isaiah Davis more. He was ultra productive at South Dakota State, but I watched them and walked away feeling it was much more about the 3 NFL caliber linemen that they had playing at South Dakota State than it was about Isaiah Davis, who has good vision, made the most of his good blocking, but I don't know. I felt like they wasted this pick. Love the Quantez Stiggers pick. I mean, why the hell not? He was a baller in the CFL, kind of a wild card in this draft. I felt like this was about where he was going to go. I really only knew of his story. I didn't get into CFL tape this year, so I didn't end up putting a final grade on him, but I love him in this room where he has opportunities to climb up the depth chart. They lost Bryce Hall, their CB4 in that room. But DJ Reed's not going to be able to play forever, so he's an interesting guy to bring in here that has starter traits. It's just he's coming from the CFL, and let's see what he can do. So I think it was a good pick. And then Mr. Irrelevant, Jalen Key, out of Alabama. I actually didn't get around to his tape. I wasn't aware of him while I was doing those other Alabama corners. Probably should have been, but he gets drafted here, Mr. Irrelevant. Probably special teams talent. Fine enough pick, whatever. Love what the Jets did. I really do. I think they knocked it out of the park, kind of threading the needle with the 2 pieces that they needed still to go on that offense. The defense is rocking and rolling to go. You even added a goal line back like Braylon Allen and a good backup. So just think they crushed it. It's as close to as an A+ as I'm going to go. I was already iffy on giving the Olu Fashanu a certified steal grade. I think that was more of an A+ than an S, but it's not in my grading criteria. So anyway, I'm going to go with an A on the Jets. Loved what they did. And that is going to do it for the AFC East. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Let me know your thoughts down below. Where do you think I'm right? Where do you think I'm wrong with these players, with these grades? Please do hit that like button on the way out. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss our 3 remaining NFL draft grades. You can catch up on all the ones we've done so far. But until the next draft grades video, have a nice day, and we'll see you soon. Peace out.